None of this I could have predicted. None of it's beyond anything I could have predicted. It all goes back to Dr. Jafi, and he says, in medicine, you can either treat the symptoms or you could stimulate the body to heal from within holistically. I think the same principle applies to a city. You can either treat the symptoms or you could stimulate the city to heal from within. And he says, I think that has something to do with kindness. It was a light bulb moment. We should change the culture in our city so we're a kinder city, one of kindness. It wasn't a city hall thing. This is about the people taking control and changing their culture. The Dalai Lama, he had heard about it. He had invited my wife and I to meet in India. People get connected through acts of kindness. That's the mortar that holds the bricks together. It creates a community, it creates a neighborhood. And I got the idea from a 6-year-old who saw it clearly. We're here to help one another. And if we do, everything gets better.
Tom, it's great to have you on. Welcome back.
It's great to be back. It's great to be back.
We want to talk to you about an important topic that we didn't cover with you last time. It's kindness. And you were former mayor of Anaheim, yep. And you made the city of kindness. Can you tell us what you did there?
Well, probably the best way is I can start how I came about this idea. Start from the beginning for me politically was I was actually appointed to the city council back in 1994. And I served for 10 years on the city council. Now, I never thought I'd run for office, but because of circumstances at that time, I got appointed, and then when I was in, I ran for re-election. In 2004, so I'm about to be finished my term, and I'm about to leave office, and I thought I was done with politics. And I noticed around town that these signs were going up that simply said, make kindness contagious. And it didn't say, having to do with buying something or some sort of commercial thing. It just said, make kindness contagious. And I remember seeing that, and I remember how it just lifted me up.
Multiple signs or just one?
Multiple signs. And my wife called me and says, a friend of hers called her and said, I think Tom should meet this guy who's putting these signs up around town. And so I scheduled a time on my council days, and his name was Dr. Jafi. And he came into my office, I remember it like it was yesterday. And he came in, he just had a lot of energy. He's from Argentina, and he had that energy, reminded me of that movie, Life is Beautiful, the actor in that, if you remember that, just big energy. Came in and he told me a story about his daughter, Natasha, his little 6-year-old daughter who had died in a car accident, tragically died that summer before. And they found all these beautiful things that Natasha had written about kindness as a little 6-year-old. And how the community came out and said, when other kids were playing video games or whatever, Natasha was always writing and talking about kindness. And so then Dr. Jafi says, and he's a holistic doctor, and he says, he said, in medicine, you can either treat the symptoms or you could stimulate the body to heal from within holistically. And then he says, I think the same principle applies to a city. You can either treat the symptoms or you could stimulate the city to heal from within. And he says, I think that has something to do with kindness. And probably because I had 10 years of sitting on that city council and I've been contemplating how the city hasn't really changed much in any kind of deep way since when I started to when I finished. And it was a light bulb moment where when you hear the truth, you know it. And so anyway, so that was, I knew that was something had to be something deeper. So I know also from business that it's all about culture, right? So why is one business worth more than another business? Why is it more valuable? Why is Nordstrom's different from Macy's? Same ball, one's at one end, one's at the other. Seem like they're kind of the same stuff, but why do you gravitate towards one and not the other? And so culture creates value in business and creates what a business is, and successful businesses have successful cultures. Those that don't. So I knew culture is important, and I thought, boy, if you could change the culture of a city, just like a CEO can of a business, and why not a mayor for a whole city? Have something to do with it anyway. And if we could create a culture of kindness where everyone's a little kinder, then I think everything gets better.
So that idea came to you when you were terming out?
Yes. The idea from Dr. Jafi and this idea of holistically healing the city with a culture change.
From within,
From
with
within.
a culture change.
I did not want to get back in politics, and but this idea, I could say, pulled at me. I think it was having to do with my purpose. I think I prayed to God, because I really didn't want to do it, but I felt I had to. And it's kind of one of those things, if I don't do it and run on this platform of kindness, no one's going to do it, and it's just not going to happen. So I felt I had to. But I had, being mayor is different from being on the city council. And one thing being mayor is you have to do a lot of public speaking. And I had this terrible fear of public speaking. I know a lot of people do, but I had it terribly bad.
Especially you're an engineer, right?
Well, actually, no. I'm run a business, engineering business, but I'm not an engineer. But I always try to avoid situations where I'd have to, even give a toast or anything like that. And so I'd overcome that fear to do it. So I actually joined Toastmasters because I thought I've got to do that. So fear of ridicule. Running for on a platform of kindness. People are going to not think I'm serious, maybe make fun of it. At that time, the word kindness just wasn't even used much. And Dr. Jafi, I think, kind of brought it, through Natasha, found this beautiful word and brought it out. And like Dr. Jafi says, kindness is much different from being nice. And actually, they're very different. And he says there's love behind kindness. And kindness is doing something for someone else with no expectation in return, helping somebody else. Where nice is really you're doing something so somebody likes you. So it's very self-centered. Kindness is other-centered. Just putting it out there.
No expectation for anything.
No expectation of anything, and which is really gets to what love is. And so there's love behind kindness.
When you had this idea, you were concerned that you might face some ridicule.
Yes.
Did you talk to some friends, and how did that go?
It wasn't typical. I mean, typically you run on typical issues, and I call it symptoms. And and part of this was, on the council, I felt after 10 years that I had. I'd been treating symptoms. As I mentioned, you either treat the symptoms or stimulate the city to heal from within. And the symptoms, I really felt after 10 years is kind of the whack-a-mole game of symptom treating. Crime goes up, hire more police, things like bullying at schools, things like senior loneliness and neglect, things like that the city's working on that you're really just putting Band-Aids on things. So when I decided to run, I had to overcome the fear of public speaking, fear of ridicule, and I talked to some of my friends, and they thought that's kind of I think they thought I was a little crazy for running on this platform of kindness. But I felt I was pulled to this idea, and I really had to do it. So my first campaign event, I remember I was standing up there, and someone asked why I'm running, and I'm like, okay, here goes. And I said, I think we should change the culture in our city so we're a kinder city, one of kindness. And I said, I think when that happens, everything will get better. And I saw people in the audience like nodding their head in agreement. And afterwards, I talked to someone, and they said, what, we all think that something deeper needs to happen, the way that we govern and the way that we are. So anyway, that was my first. Okay, I think people get this. So I ran on that platform, and I ended up winning by a lot. And then once I was in office, so I get elected, and I think this probably happens a lot. So now I'm mayor, and I ran on this platform of kindness, and now what do I do? So I had to come up with some things, some policies and things like that. So the first thing we came up with was this idea of we called it high neighbor. And actually I borrowed that from back in the 50s in Anaheim, when Anaheim was a small town and growing so fast. I think it was a Lions Club that had a program called High Neighbor. Neighbors getting to know each other because everyone was moving in so fast. This massive growth in Southern California. And I thought I'm going to have a High Neighbor program because part of our problem in Southern California, or challenge in Southern California, is so many people. It is relatively new. And then we also is designed around the automobile, around the car. We come home from work or whatever, and we pull in the garage, close the garage door, backyard, big fences around the yard. And we're to ourselves, as opposed to maybe other parts of the country where it's maybe is designed around older, maybe you have front porches, people walking in the neighborhoods. So those neighborhoods are more connected. So I thought, we need a little more help here. We have to be mindful of connecting. So I started this High Neighbor program. But it's very important, there's very important civic reasons to be connected in your neighborhood. And people get connected through acts of kindness, if you think about it. That's the mortar that holds the bricks together, that creates a community, it creates a neighborhood, creates that resiliency that we need. So it's very important for community policing. You need to know that if you see a van pulled up 3 doors down, you should be able to call your neighbor and say, is that your van? Or maybe, hopefully it's not somebody ripping you off. And if it is, then that person calls the police. And so that's a big component of community policing. And it's important. Our police chief at the time, told me, he says, criminals will know intuitively whether a neighborhood's well connected and people are looking out for one another. So it's important that way. But also, I remember when I was mayor, there was a middle school kid who was killed, who was tagging, part of a tagging gang, and he was murdered, and by a rival gang. And I thought, maybe when he was 10 or 11, and he's in that neighborhood, and maybe his parents are working a couple shifts, and maybe someone in the neighborhood tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, you're going in the wrong direction, and maybe help mentor him back, or kept an eye on him. And so I know when I was a kid, growing up, I cared about my parents, what they thought about me, but I also cared about the neighbor, Mrs. Rudy down the street, who was keeping an eye on me. So that's part of being in a neighborhood, and keeps us all safer, and we look out for one another. So it's important for those reasons, those I guess we'll call it public safety reasons, but also for emergency response. So if here in Southern California, and we're one day closer to that big earthquake or whatever, if we're not connected in our neighborhood, in our community, when those things happen, we're in deep trouble. So we're going to have to know that.
Tom's kindness movement gathered the attention of areas all around the world and is taken form in many different ways. Tom even had the chance to sit down with the Dalai Lama on this matter. To hear the rest of Tom's kindness movement, visit Ganjin World or Epoch TV, where you can watch this full exclusive episode and many other ones free of charge. We will leave you a link in the description below and the comments. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video.